Anthony Schaefer, a senior fellow at the Center for Advanced Defense Studies in Washington. He's an Afghan war vet who led Black Ops teams and received the Bronze Star for his service. We're also joined by Ashwin Madia, interim chairman of VoteVets.org, as well as an Iraq war vet himself. Welcome, gentlemen. Tony, let me start with you. I've said this before, and it's still amazing to me. 10 years in, we've got this bad news coming in on deaths and casualties, contracting fraud. This would never happen if we actually had a draft, if the sons and daughters of the elites who are calling the shots were actually at stake in this war. I think this thing would have been pulled to an end a long time ago. Instead, we've got, quote unquote, other people's children fighting this war. Am I wrong?
I think you're absolutely right. People are dismissive of the idea that we have a volunteer force, so they volunteer, their lives are expendable. It's just insane. And what we need to look at here, Matt, as you brought up, I mean, the insanity of this investment of blood and treasure, and for no clear objective or end. And let me say something here that's going to ring a bell maybe with you. They're talking about pulling out 10,000 troops by the end of the year. Matt, we only had 10,000 troops in 2002, 2003, and we were winning. The reason we were winning is because we weren't trying to force the Afghan people to embrace a government which is corrupt or, push them towards the Taliban. We actually were trying to allow the people, imagine that, the Afghan people aren't ungoverned, they're self-governed. That should have been our focus, not trying to push them into the Jeffersonian democracy. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the end effects now of this idea that we know best, let's give you government, let's let you have everything we have, and they just don't want it.
Now, Ashwin, what's insane about this as well is, we hear talk from the president that we're beginning to do the withdrawal, and you've got Mitt Romney, and other Republicans saying you've got to listen to the generals, and Obama is, too far to the left of the generals in terms of accelerating withdrawal. But when the dust clears, even with the withdrawal of 30,000 troops that Obama's talked about, at the end of 2012, we'll still have more troops on the ground in Afghanistan than we had when President Obama took office. How can that make sense after 10 years in a place that's, been the kind of burial ground for empires throughout the centuries?
Well, I think your point is right. I think that Obama's plan is a step in the right direction in that it's finally moving from, or it seems to be moving from counterinsurgency operations to counterterrorism operations, which is, as Lieutenant Colonel was stating earlier, where we started this mission, where we should ultimately finish this mission, which is targeting Al-Qaeda and denying them a safe haven in Afghanistan. But what's happened is that because of mission creep and because of various other political concerns, this has turned into a nation-building mission which hasn't been successful. So, to your point, yes, I think Obama's plan is a step in the right direction, but I think he's going to have to go much further to get down to the kind of lean force with an emphasis on intelligence and special operations that can be useful in counterterrorism that doesn't leave us vulnerable in the way that we are right now.
Now, Tony, when you talk about nation building as the mission, we have a lot of nation building we need to do at home. And I want to play for you, the news today of this report that Chris Shays, the former congressman who's now actually running for Joe Lieberman's open Senate seat in Connecticut, he was a co-chair of this commission talking about billions and billions of dollars that we put there being wasted because of mismanagement with contractors. Let me play what Chris Shays had to say, and then I'll get your reaction.
The government was not prepared to go into Afghanistan in 2001 or Iraq in 2003 using large numbers of contractors. We were not prepared to use contractors, and we are still not adequately prepared to use contractors to the scale required.
Now, this is 10 years in. It's already America's longest war.
Right.
If we're not prepared now, what are we doing? And who's getting these billions of dollars?
Well, I think that's the key. We talk about here, the report today talking about $60 billion being on the low end of the estimate of what's been wasted. And get this, the money that's been successfully spent, well, the truth be told, that money has actually been spent to help the insurgents. We pay a lot of money for shipping of goods through Pakistan, and I'm telling you, Matt, some of that money gets off into the Taliban because they pay, you have to bribe your way through it. So therefore, the money we pay actually comes back against us when these guys buy arms. And Chris Shays is totally correct. I've testified before Congressman Shays. He's a great guy, and what he's saying is absolutely correct. We've got to look at this. And by the way, another unreported number, we have as many contractors in Afghanistan as we have troops. So we actually have double the number of Americans that what we publicly talk about.
Now, Ashwin, you served in Iraq. I've got a couple of friends in Afghanistan now. What amazes me is and I'm curious what you think the effect on morale is, they watch the debate in the United States, which proceeds as if there was no war. And we weren't at war, spending $150 billion a year on this stuff, borrowing it all from our children, and at the same time, continuing to prioritize keeping taxes low on the wealthiest Americans. They look at this, soldiers on the ground, and say, you know, this looks like another planet. What can you tell us about the view from the ground in the way the troops look at this kind of surreal American debate?
Well, what I'd say is probably the view amongst the troops is as varied and as diverse as is amongst the American people. But your point is spot on, which is this is the first time that this country's ever been at war, and we've been just relentlessly cutting taxes. And it goes to what you were saying earlier. I mean, you're talking about...
And not just on anyone. We keep prioritizing low taxes for the wealthiest Americans as if they had no obligation to contribute to a nation at war.
That's right. And so what not at all. So what that results in is that the entire burden of this war has been shifted on a very few select people, namely the military and their families. They're going on 3-4 deployments, while the rest of us get these huge tax cuts and aren't really asked for any sacrifice at all. It is very easy for us as a country to be at war if no one has to pay any price except less than 2% of the people. If, however, like you said, if they started changing things and if they made us all pay our fair share for this war, I think you'd see a lot more and a lot faster political support for finding a quick and expedient end to these endless wars.
Now, Tony, let me shift to the campaign debate that is unfolding. And here's my fear. You've got one boundary of debate being the president's, which is we're beginning to do a withdrawal, even as we've been saying, there'll still be far more troops left on the ground in Afghanistan at the end of his first term than he inherited. But then you're going to have whoever the Republican is feeling a need to outflank the president on the right, saying, oh, he's not listening to the generals. That means we need more troops than what Obama wants. Where in this debate will there be an ability to get traction on more dramatic reductions faster so we can begin the work of rebuilding America, which is so urgent?
Well, let me be very direct here, and this is going to upset a lot of folks. The generals should not be listened to at this point. I heard them testify about 2 months ago. They talked about progress being made. General Keane, former Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, actually said that the Taliban were no longer a viable military force. What? So we've got to look at the realistic path forward. President Obama has it partially right. If I were him, I would cut the troops out now. I would go back to the anti-terrorism strategy now. Do what's effective, not what's politically expedient. And this is what we need to do. And I hope the Republicans will look at this the same way. This should not be a partisan issue. We should look at what will help us achieve regional stability and our protection, not on what plays best politically.
All right. Tony Shaffer, Ashwin, Madia, thanks for giving us your perspective and giving us a path to exit, even if we don't have our leaders convinced of that yet. Thanks for taking the time.